All right, you all, do you remember when you were in high school and you had to read Romeo and Juliet? Oh my gosh, what a tragic love story. Well, guess what? So right here in Appalachia, we have our very own Romeo and Juliet version of a tragic love story. The story is so good. So Roseanna McCoy of the McCoys and Johnse Hatfield of the Hatfields, in part of the Hatfield-McCoy feud, were in love with each other, or Roseanna was in love with him. Well, there was an election, and they met up at the election poll, and they snuck off together. Oh, doesn't that just sound like Romeo and Juliet? Absolutely. And then when they returned, the poll was closed, and Roseanna, being scared to return to her family, went with Johnse to stay in Devil Anse's house. Yes, that's Devil Anse Hatfield. Later, Roseanna found out that Johnse was not faithful to her. Now, that's a little different than regular Romeo and Juliet, but it's still star-crossed lovers, if you want to say that. And then Roseanna returned home to the McCoys. But upon returning, her father would not let her stay. He kind of disowned her. So with that, she was with child at that time. So she came over here to Stringtown to live with her Aunt Betty. And she gave birth to the baby. Sally passed away. And she is buried in this cemetery. And here is the marker for her remembrance. But Roseanna was so grieved over Johnse and then losing her baby that she just lost her will to live. And Roseanna is not buried here with her baby, but she is buried at the Dill Cemetery with her parents in Pikeville, Kentucky. So let's take a look at the baby's grave.
This is beat the pipe the money in.
Proceed to the route.
Something like that. I quit counting. All right, folks, here is a story of an Appalachia Romeo and Juliet, Roseanna McCoy and Johnse Hatfield. This story raged through the Hatfield and McCoy feud. So here's what we have. We have their baby's grave. So Sarah Elizabeth, little Sally, was the daughter of Roseanna McCoy and Johnse Hatfield. She was born in the spring of 1881 and died when she was only 8 months old. In 1880, Roseanna met Johnse at an election day celebration on Blackberry Creek in Pike County. That is in Kentucky. They slipped away from the crowd, and when they returned to the polling place, it was deserted. Fearful of her family's reaction, Roseanna went home with Johnse to West Virginia. Devalance, which was Johnse's father, would not allow his son to wed the daughter of Randolph McCoy. But Roseanna loved Johnse and stayed with him in Devalance's home. But she became discouraged because he was unfaithful. Disillusioned, she returned home to Kentucky to have Johnse's baby. Her father, Randolph, rejected her, and Roseanna went to live with her Aunt Betty at Stringtown, Kentucky, which is where we're at right now. Sarah Elizabeth is buried on the hilltop under the pine trees above Uriah McCoy's house. Broken-hearted after the baby's death, Roseanna grieved at the grave and lost her will to live. So a different take on Romeo and Juliet, but kind of the same thing. All right. So also we have Thomas McCoy, 1872 to 1955. Erie Jane McCoy, 1875 to 1940. This was interesting. Lewis McCoy, 1891 to 1961. And then we have all these graves. Can't really tell what that says. So here's a look at the whole cemetery. And here is Sarah Elizabeth, 1881, daughter of Roseanna McCoy and Johnse Hatfield. So this is the actual headstone of the baby. And then down at the bottom of all 122 steps, Aunt Betty's house, where Roseanna came to live because her father, Randolph, disowned her. As we're heading back down all 122 steps that it took to get up to see the baby's grave, you can see Aunt Betty's house where Roseanna came to live after her father would not let her return home, and she was pregnant with her and Johnse's baby. So let's make the trek back down. This is such a beautiful area. Alright, so here's the house, and then when you pull into the parking area, you are greeted with the same signage that is on the marker up on top of the cemetery. So it's the same thing that we were talking about. But y'all, I am just so amazed that, you know, I feel like Randall McCoy was a very kind and generous man, but even with his daughter, he was like, no, sorry. That's how deep rooted this feud was between the Hatfields and McCoys, that he was willing to put his own daughter out just because she was carrying a Hatfield baby. If you are not familiar with the Hatfield and McCoy feud, you need to get familiar with it. It is an absolutely amazing deep dive and story, and just part of the Appalachian history. So good.